Welcome everybody to the Thin Green Line podcast. We are very honored to have a very special guest today. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North is joining us from all over the country. We're all spread out today. And while his introduction, I probably don't need to go into too in depth because I know you all know him, but I'm going to do my best to condense one and welcome the Colonel to the show. Oliver North is a highly decorated retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel who served in Vietnam during his 22-year military career. He's an American political commentator, military historian, New York Times best-selling author, and host of the Fox News documentary series War Stories for 15 years. Lieutenant Colonel served as president of the National Rifle Association between 2018 and 2019, fighting for our nation's Second Amendment rights, and now hosts his new online series, Real American Heroes. Near and dear to us on the Thin Green Line podcast is Colonel North's love for the outdoors, shooting sports, and wildlife conservation, and his help in supporting our conservation officers nationwide in protecting our natural resources from both foreign and domestic threats. Colonel North, how are you today? We're very honored to have you on the show.
And great to be with you and Wayne. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Colonel.
Well, sir, obviously we have so many things to cover from the standpoint of conservation, outdoor awareness, border protection, domestic security, all things that you have extensive knowledge in. But on the Thin Green Line, we really get into environmental aspects, being conservationists, Second Amendment, fans, and been using firearms their whole lives, like you have. And just, you've spent your entire military career and all of your work since retiring from the Marine Corps, serving our country, and we are very grateful for that. You just don't stop, sir, since I've known you. It's nonstop, and it's great to see. And through your books, your War Stories documentary, and now Real American Heroes, your latest online series, you continue to highlight the military, law enforcement, and other first responder warriors fighting to keep our public lands, our wildlife, and our inner borders safe. What keeps you in the fight, sir, at this stage in your career? And when did you develop that love for shooting, that love for conservation, and how did it all start for you?
Well, what keeps me going right now is I got 18 grandkids, and I want them to have the same kinds of opportunities that we've had, the same kinds of responsibilities that we've had. Don't want big government telling them what to do and where to go and who they can talk to. Want to make sure that they've got the same economic opportunities that we've had. Fox paid me a hell of a lot more to get shot at than the Marine Corps ever did. I love being a U.S. Marine, but I grew up as the son of a soldier. Very first hero I ever knew was my dad. He was the kind of person who didn't talk a whole lot about the things he'd done, and it wasn't until after he died in 1984 that any of us had ever read his citations for the Silver Star and the Bronze Star in World War II. His 95th Infantry Division, he was an infantry officer, was part of Patton's Third Army in the attack on Metz, which was one of the bloodiest battles of the European theater. When I look back at those kinds of experiences, it's not all that challenging to come in and say, look, with my foundation, Freedom Alliance, or the books that I write, honoring heroes is something very special to me. And you've heard me say this before, John, but the definition of a hero is not someone who catches a pass in an end zone. It's not some athlete who just set some new record, or somebody just climbed a mountain faster than somebody else had ever done. A hero is a person who puts themselves at risk for the benefit of others. And that certainly defined my dad. It defines the guys in all of those books that you see behind me that I've written about American heroes. And I've been blessed to be able to keep company with them for the last 75 years. Since I was born, I just retired again from Fox here in 2018. So 75 years is a good long time to keep company with heroes.
Amen, Colonel. And it's really, really awesome to see. And we thank you for that. And I remember when you and I met through my latest book, Hidden War, way back beginning of last year, you were running the NRA. You were running around honoring heroes all over the country with a mutual friend of ours, cinematographer Dennis Azzato. And just, I don't know anybody who is out there telling those stories, of those real hero stories, and really getting back to the sacrifice of Americans for Americans than you are. And thank you so much for doing that. And I really want our listeners and our viewers coming in that are new to the story to realize that it's an incredible story, and you're doing it every day. And thank you for that.
Yeah, that's why I did what I did for that book of yours, because you're
Thank you so much. And Colonel, so who taught you to shoot? let's go way back to the opening days. Was it dad? Did you hone those skills in the Marine Corps, obviously, or how did it start for you?
Well, the very first firearm that I fired was the gift that my dad gave to all my brothers and me. And it was a Savage 22 410 over under. Nice. And of course, the 410 is great for rabbit hunting. We never shot our beagle. It was great to go out after dad had taught us all the right safety things and taught us how to take it apart and put it back together again, then taught us how to shoot it straight, taught us about the warnings about pointing in any other direction other than the thing you want to shoot. Those are the kinds of things when you grow up that way, it's not all that hard to pass them on to my grandkids or my own children. You know, when my son turned 14, and I did this with one of his sisters, I now do it with all 18 grandkids. When they turn 14, it's a little older than I was. I guess my brothers and I we were probably about 11 when we started shooting. And with that beagle, we got a lot of rabbits. And we did. You know, as you probably know, there's no limit on rabbits. I mean, it's
right.
You know,
what a great way to start.
Game limits are for a reason. That's why I get along with all those wonderful game wardens that I've gotten to know over the years. So I give my grandkids a box when they turn 14. The box has a label on it. On the label, it says, if you'll learn to use everything in this box, you'll never be hungry, you'll never be lost, and you need fear nothing. And I will show you how. So you open the box, and the first thing that's in the box is a Holy Bible. And it's already pegged to Proverbs. And so, of course, you can see what else is in the box, and they want to move on to that. It just happens. It just happens that there are 31 Proverbs, and there's 31 days in half the months. So today being the 2nd of October, start on Proverbs 2. When you get back to Proverbs 1, I want you to come and see me and give me a book report, okay, on what you learned. Because Proverbs essentially are Solomon's instructions to his sons. That's what it's all about. And he's trying to teach them the wisdom that he gained over the course of his lifetime. And so they give me the book report. And then next thing in the box is a lensatic compass, a real lensatic compass, and a map sheet. And the map sheet just happens to be my wife's farm. And it's the Appalachian Trails 1 to 25,000 scale, you know, with all the right indicators on it, with grid squares and the like. And it's got my wife's farm. We live on the Shenandoah River. That's the front yard. The Appalachian Trail is the backyard. And I will show you how to use that map and compass. And it just happens because I learned how to do this in the Marines. There's ammo cans welded to engineer stakes out in the woods with notes in them. And you open up the ammo can and you bring back that note that was in there. So I know you've actually been there. And there are terrain features that are relatively easy to see on a 1 to 25,000 scale. So I take them out and I show them how to do that, both daytime and nighttime. And then the third item in the box is a 20 gauge shotgun. It's a Remington 870. It's a youth gun. And the note on that says, before you shoot this thing, you're going to show me that you can take it apart and put it back together again in daylight. You don't have to do it blindfold. Then I'll show you how to clean it. And when you show me how, while you've cleaned it, and then I'll take you out and show you how to shoot it safely. And so it turns out to be about a 3-month process of getting through all that. And I can tell you right now, all 12 of those who now have one of those shotguns can outshoot me on the clay pigeons. I taught them everything that they know, and apparently too much of what I know.
That's an incredible story, Colonel. And I just think of how we all learn from dad, from granddad, you know, from those mentors growing up. But I haven't seen such a comprehensive introduction into conservation and firearm safety and ethics, and making it so fun and exciting. You know, it's almost like your grandkids are out there geocaching and, you know, compass and map reading and land nav, and they're building skills that they might not even know are that critical yet. You know, that's super cool. What a needed experience for all of them.
Well, as you and I have talked before, there may come a day when the GPS, you know, here's my GPS, right? It's built into this phone, right? There may come a day when the GPS system isn't there anymore. And so I want my youngins to know how to read a map, how to get in a direction, how to go in a direction where they want to go, rather than being taken there by somebody else.
Yeah, definitely a lost art. We're relying on so much technology, right, Colonel? And I noticed this, on our special operations unit, Met, and other special forces military colleagues I work with, all over the world. We have those great systems now, but that map reading and that natural land nav and trail route, running and man tracking sign, animal tracking sign is becoming a lost art. It really is. And it's neat you're doing it with your grandkids. And when this stuff does go down, if it goes down, especially in today's times, and we're going to talk more about that in a little bit, it is critical for sure.
Yeah, that's a
You
huge
got it, brother.
Huge segue into our next question, Colonel. And let me say it's an honor and privilege too to be on this podcast with you. And thank you for taking your time. And when my son listens to this, he's going to be in pure shock that he's going to look at me and say, "Are you going to do that to me?"
Where's my hidden box and 3-month training program?
Because I'm sure your first grandchild that you did to probably had that look on his face too, and he's passed on down the line, his knowledge. But the first one must have been a shocker.
Yeah. Well, they all now come to expect it, and I was just giving them to the boys. Well, we now have one of our granddaughters. I grew up in an all boy environment, right? Spent my life with a bunch of guys. And the young gal who's now in college said to me, "You gave my brother one of those. Do I get mine?"
She got it, I'm sure.
Got it.
Colonel, with everything going on now with COVID-19, it's brought the citizenship to, I think, understanding that maybe we need to be more self-reliant. Guns are flying off the shelves, ammo, you can't find it in stores, food prices are going up, certain segments of the country. What can they do to be more prepared, and what is our greatest threat?
Well, look, first of all, we live out in the country, so we're not in a condo where the elevators can stop with a hurricane. What we do know is that there's going to be a time, even if it's a natural disaster, where you've got to have things like a food supply that's useful. Doesn't pay to have frozen food when the power's out. Now, we've got generators and all that, but eventually those things run out of fuel as well. If, for example, the Chinese, the communist Chinese, or the Iranians, or the North Koreans hit the United States with an electromagnetic pulse, which is entirely possible with nuclear weapons, that could, for over large segments, if not the entire country, large segments of the country would be without power, not just for a few days, but for a year or more. And so it pays to have some form of food that is shelf ready, that all you have to do is add water. And pretty much, even though you might be in a condo with no electricity, pretty much water is available. We've got cases of water stored that we rotate, and just in case. I mean, it only makes sense. And we got a river, of course, it's our front yard. You wouldn't want to drink out of it necessarily till you boiled it, or at least cleaned it up with some iodine or from chlorine tablets. What I'm saying to you is proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. I mean, I'll put it the way the Marines do. And the idea is you got to have the situational awareness to know what you're preparing for and what the consequences would be for your family and you. And my idea of doing that kind of stuff is it doesn't take a whole lot. You don't have to do it every day. You don't have to have 5 years worth of supply of food. Though I know people who've got multi-years stored up in those 5-gallon buckets. That's the kind of thing that I think just makes common sense in the world that we're in right now. And as the world changes, just days ago, the president of the United States came down with COVID, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at if the president can get COVID, anybody can get COVID. And the idea behind protecting ourselves from that is, wear a mask, wash your hands, make sure that if your temperature goes up, you get medical attention. Those are the kinds of things, again, situational awareness and having a plan to deal with it.
Thank you.
Colonel, when we talk about the COVID and we talk about what the world is facing right now, and we think, and we're going to talk a little bit about a new book coming up here shortly, but survival is one thing, but what are the other domestic threats you see going on nationally? And obviously preparedness, like Wayne just mentioned, but especially in our urban centers and our kids in our urban centers that are that when the power goes out, there isn't a supply of water, there isn't a supply of food. We're obviously seeing some looting, we're seeing some rioting, we're seeing some divisiveness on the left and the right now. That's been a big change and a big eye-opening awareness for the public through COVID now, especially in our urban population centers. And what can you say to that, and where we're going in the direction for preparedness, those of us that don't live in the country, which the three of us are very fortunate to be able to do?
Well, one of the things about the fact that firearms, you have to forgive me, the frog in my throat has gotten worse. There's no doubt firearms are flying off shelves and the ammunition is hard to get. You and I have carried firearms all our lives, right? The idea of getting a firearm and having never fired one before and getting no instructions on it is nuts. It's more dangerous than walking out in the streets in a place like Portland. And so what you want to make sure you're doing is something with real common sense. Go out and get some training. Most places, in Virginia that sell firearms either have a connection with or have their own firing range, and they have instructors. Get the instruction, the safety instruction, how to use it. Hell, I've seen people buying firearms that don't even know what caliber they're buying, and they have to go to the clerk and say, "Can you point to me a box of what ammo I need for this thing?"
Yeah.
It's the kind of that makes absolutely no sense to me. Number two, the urban environment in America today is a mess, right? What do most Americans want for their families? They want safety of their home, their business, the streets of their city. You don't want to get the idea of driving into somewhere like Portland when you don't have to makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Thank you, dear. My lovely wife just brought me water. Thank you, honey. She was listening to how raspy I was getting. The bottom line of it is situational awareness goes a long ways to saving lives. Number two, proper prior planning gives you the idea of, I need to get a firearm. You also need to make sure you're getting training on how to use that firearm safely, how to keep it secure. You don't want I don't want my grandkids walking around and finding a firearm that's not properly secured. So we've got safes, gun safes. We have the kind of safe where if you need it in the middle of the night, you put your handprint down on top of it and it snaps open. But by the way, you have to change the batteries in every year. Those are the kind of things. No, look, see, but it's common sense. And people who just drive into a place like Seattle or Portland or Minneapolis or anywhere else where you're having these kinds of disturbances, you got to be a little nuts to go out there looking for trouble.
Yeah, for sure. And to that point, Colonel, one thing we've seen, and Wayne and I talked about this on previous shows, and as bad as COVID's been, between April and May, there was a 25 to 30% increase in hunting license sales, which most states, as you know, require a hunter education class. Some are online, some aren't physically, hands-on with firearms to get a little bit 22 training or get on a rimfire or get on a shotgun and break a clay or two, but especially in COVID. But it lends itself to that being required and more people getting awareness beyond just, oh, the world's going to crap. I'm going to go buy that gun I don't know the caliber about. I'm going to put it in a safe and I'm going to be a train wreck if I have to use it. But we've seen this increase in, especially from non-hunters, non-consumptive users, people that didn't have the background in conservation that you and I and Wayne and people like us have had. And it's been encouraging to see. But the training aspect of it is still significantly lacking. And we're curious to what your thoughts are on going forward. Is that wave of enthusiasm for self-reliance and conservation and hunting license sales going to maintain? Hopefully, we hope it will. Certainly, we want to see conservation thrive from our standpoint, but sure. It has been encouraging thus far to see, and wondering what you're seeing on that realm.
Well, many years ago, when we first moved out to the farm, one of our neighbors had a herd of Angus cattle, and Betsy, my wife, has a herd of Angus cattle as well, because living on the side of the mountain, they all have, the legs on the left side are shorter than the ones on the right. And actually had one of his cows shot by a, quote, hunter who didn't have a license, but he was adamant that he was going to learn how to do it. A person living in Washington, D.C. And of course, called the game warden. It's not hard to track down. And of course, he realized once he shot it, there was no way he could pick it up, wouldn't know how to quarter it, even if he, had the right to shoot something that large. Look at, I say to myself, we've got a garden. We grow vegetables. We grow cows. we're going to eat fine in the midst of something else, something terrible that happens. And the bottom line of it is we're overrun with deer. And
Yeah.
I mean, but like everything else, I'm a wing hunter as well. And so like everything else, there's limits to how much you can take, how much you can secure. And the noise you hear is a U.S. Coast Guard helicopter flying right over our heads.
It's a good sound. I
can
like
see
that.
it. Yeah. There he goes. Sorry for the noise.
But all right.
I'm looking at the Atlantic Ocean. That's why you heard that sound.
Nice.
And that must be, yeah, it's 11:15. He's a little late this morning. So,
Yeah.
he's coming back. I wonder if he's listening. Anyway, we'll deal with it. I actually think they're doing a drill right outside.
Well, nice to know. We got some coasties, working sorties right over you, Colonel. That's a good feeling to have next to the ranch. Not a bad problem.
As you know, there's Marine air stations on either side of us. So every once in a while, somebody will come by with something, and then they'll see the flag out in front, and you'll do, not with a helicopter, but with a fixed wing, they'll do a rollover and just, they're waving.
Yeah. Great to see and hear. I know in my old days living in California, based out of Silicon Valley, we had Moffett Field, and we had the 129th and the Pavehawk Squadron just flying sorties over the tech capital, and you can imagine how loud those are. And then using those birds for med operations was just it was just great. I mean, to talk about a patriotic connection in the tech capital. So I know the feeling. Very loud, very distracting, but very awesome to see and hear.
Mm-hmm.
All right. As you're saying, sir.
It's the sound of freedom, our tax dollars at work. Here comes again. Actually, it looks like they're going after a buoy that's out there. And he's now got a wingman. So yeah, we're gonna have to put up with this, guys. I'm sorry.
That's
no worries. Right. We still got you loud and clear. It's a nice backdrop for sure.
No doubt about it.
But yeah, Colonel, to your point on the hunting aspect, that's exactly what Wayne and I talk about from being retired game wardens. Is everybody getting these licenses, everybody going out to learn hunting, prep survival, and everything else, and poaching kind of going up in quantity, and we have been seeing that. We've been seeing national forests destroyed, gates cut, animals being poached. Obviously, like we talked about a few weeks ago in your show, the cartels running rampant on tainted weed production and meth and fentanyl and everything else because there's just so little law enforcement presence in the backcountry right now. And we're kind of relying on getting that message out to future conservationists to be our force multiplier, to be our eyes and ears, because we're so thin on that thin green line. So encouraging more hunting, more ethical, legal conservationists out there with a love of wildlife like we all share is encouraging to see, and we've never needed more of it, and we're just hoping it continues to grow through these trying times.
Well, it's the right thing to do. I've got a great relationship with the game wardens out in Western Virginia where we live, and I'll tell you, the game wardens are at risk, and some of these poachers shoot back. Now, yes, we've also got the helicopters that we see out our way either are coming off of or landing at Mount Weather, which is the undisclosed location. It was given away by the Clinton administration, by the way. Told the Russians exactly what it was or what it is. And we're about, as the crow flies, 9 miles from the West Virginia border. Well, because of the lack of law enforcement, and think about this, we now got movements all across the country to defund the police, defund sheriff's office, defund game wardens. And so the flights you see down on the river are DEA flights that are looking for, very often, game wardens have spotted the marijuana plants, they've spotted the blue lights, or the ultraviolet lights that are growing the stuff at night, and it's a DEA operation, but not nearly enough to deal with the kinds of problems that you guys are seeing out there with armed bands out there cultivating, harvesting, moving it, transporting it, and delivering it and distributing it. I mean, it's a very serious problem.
No doubt.
Yeah, and we can. Sorry, when you go.
Just when crime goes into the woods, that's our operation area, and so much of it does. It's sneaking across the border or growing remotely, no matter what. And here we have one game warden covering so many square miles and running into incidents, and it's a common thing. the police in the woods. And like you said, then we transfer it over to like the DEA when we find those big grows. And my grows are much smaller than John's grows, and they took much of a more proactive than, you know, the East Coast does, but they certainly had a bigger farm than we did. So Colonel, but yeah, no, definitely. Thanks for recognizing that, because I think a lot of the citizenship doesn't, unless you are in the sportsman or understand what a game warden is. Sometimes other people have no idea that, you know, the common question among game wardens from people is, why do you carry a gun? They think you're a park ranger or something. And then when you fill them in, they get a bit greater understanding of why we carry guns. And we probably use them more than any other law enforcement out there, discharging them for all kinds of reasons.
Sure.
But thanks for recognizing that.
I admire what you do, guys. Or you did, yeah.
Yeah.
And Colonel, you know, we moving on to another subject that's near and dear to all of us. And you and I have not had the pleasure of getting to talk about this yet in our other projects, but we talked about Canine Phoebe in my last interview with you for Real American Heroes, one of our amazing law enforcement canines, you know, working on our spec ops team over there in California. And you've worked with so many, as have I, some war dogs that have just been amazing overseas with our mainline and special operations military forces. But you're a dog lover too, and you've got quite a dog in Casey, I've heard. And it turns out that I hear she's by your side all the time, and she's a heck of a bird dog. And
she's right underneath my desk right now. Her ears perked up when you heard her name.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, like our personal Labradors that Wayne and I have, you know, they're not going to bite anybody, but they're sure going to love the family and protect the family and smell stuff out.
I've got a neighbor who's just started to mow his lawn. I'm going to close the window. Okay, hang on.
Okay, you got it.
Yeah.
Just for the record, John, German Shepherd and German Wirehair Pointer is what I have. No lab. Love labs.
Oh, okay.
Don't have one. German Shepherd, German Wirehair Pointer.
Well, I've had a bunch of both. Yeah.
So Colonel, tell us.
Let me just tell you, the great thing about Casey is Casey's around 31 pounds. And I've hunted with particularly sea ducks in a canoe with a lab. There's two things you can guarantee about that. One, when the lab gets out of the canoe to get the bird, you're going to get wet. The lab comes back to the canoe with the bird. You're going to get even wetter because you're going to go over trying to get the lab back in. The great thing about Casey being 31 pounds and a Boykin Spaniel and the best retriever I've ever had, best thing about Casey, who's now looking up at me saying, why are you talking about me? I'm not even. Best thing about Casey, when she goes over the side, I don't tip over. When she comes back with the duck in her mouth, I take the duck out and then put my arm underneath the gunnel, underneath her front legs, and flip her back in, and I don't get wetted again. So wow. I can't. There's no dog I could recommend more strongly than a Boykin. First of all, they're small, they're light, their noses they're closer to the ground than the English Wirehair or a lab, and so they smell. They've got a great sense of smell, and it's one of the brightest dogs yet. They have not yet bred the brains out of the South Carolina State dog, thankfully.
Wow. The South Carolina State dog.
You know what I mean, man?
So Colonel, how old is Casey? How many years have you had her in the field? And wow.
10, and she's been hunting well since she was about 7 or 8 months old. And actually, she was a gift from a fellow who was famous in Virginia for breeding horses and hounds. His name is Turner Reuter. And Turner bred her. She was born in Aiken, South Carolina, because our daughter was riding with the U.S. Equestrian Team. And Turner had a bunch of the horses that he'd bred. He was a vet, probably in his 90s. And Casey was the runt of the litter. And I had said on air, probably with Hannity, I was on a mountaintop. Our daughter had sent me a message on one of these things, right? Only it's the satellite version of it. And it was the fact that Max, the wonder dog of the lab, had died. And I guess it was Hannity or whoever the host was. I said something like, well, how was your day today? And I said, well, it was great. We went with a special ops team to do such and such, and probably drug interdiction out of Afghanistan into Pakistan. And other than the fact that my dog died, it's been a great day. Well, Turner heard that. Our daughter didn't, because she didn't watch me on TV. The next morning, there's this little run of the litter. He says, see that little dog? That dog's got an overbite and it's the run of the litter. You can just give that dog to your dad. And so she brought it home, and I got back a few months later. There's this lovely puppy, already housebroken, and it's a natural hunter. And so we're out at a dog training place near Middleburg, Virginia. And Turner's there, and he's watching this little dog hunt into the wind every time, kicking up birds, looking at me. You want me to get it? I'll flush it for you. And so he looked at me, he says, is that damn dog I gave your daughter? I said, yes, sir. He says, I'll give you $5 grand for that dog right now. I said, you couldn't give me, I'll give you 10 grand. I think he was pulling my leg. He's getting close. she just turned 10. She just turned 10 here this past month. And she's a terrific animal. I mean, really is. And a good buddy on top of it. And on top of that, if it's cold, she'll jump right into bed with you. If it's a 1-dog night, you're fine. It's a 3-dog night, you have to find something else. Yeah.
Well, that's incredible. And Colonel, it's interesting. She seems to be like that 1 in a million dog in your family. Oh, yeah. And like you and Wayne and I have both gone through this. We've had dogs our whole lives, but that there's always that one, and you just count every day that's so special. And right now, my retired canine lab, Apollo, she's an English lab, so she's 51 pounds, makes a little less of a splash, but still more than Casey does. But she just turned. Oh yeah, and she just turned 11, and she was up in the Yak Wilderness with us just yesterday, putting up trail cameras, setting up blinds, looking, monitoring stuff, and climbing hills. And she's at the bottom of the hill looking at me like, Dad, are we really going to go up there? Or are you coming back? Because she's smart enough to know I'm putting a camera and I'm probably coming back. And she's getting a little tired, but it's just one of the. Yeah, it's just one of those things where we savor every day, and it's just so hard when they leave us, and I just feel like you got such a blessed dog in Casey. She sounds amazing. Hope to see her someday.
What's that old expression? In every man's life, there has to be one best dog.
Yeah.
So, I tell guys, we just lost a dear friend of ours that we've hunted with for years, and not to COVID. It was diabetes that got him. Ooh. But the Marine Corps is very proud of the fact that there's a hymn that says the streets of heaven are guarded by United States Marines, right? And so I told all my Marine buddies that are getting ready to go, I said, if you get there before I do, you tell the good Lord, I really appreciate the idea of guarding the streets of heaven, but if it's okay with him, I would like to be in charge of the doghouse, because we also know that in my Father's house, there are many mansions, and every dog goes to heaven. All dogs go to heaven, right? So, with the connection, yeah. I just want to be in charge of the doghouse. Yeah.
That's great, Colonel. To bring a different breed into, I'm a 4-H leader in the dog club, so I've been dealing with that. And my son actually shows the German wire hair pointer in 4-H. So bring in the Boysen Spaniel. I was actually trying to Google it to get a little lead on it, because he'll be loving to listen to this, to bring that another breed into, and I'll get the 4-H kids to listen to it too. Just to know all over North has a Boysen Spaniel, which is another breed that you don't experience a lot.
It's actually spelled Boykin. And it is the South Carolina state dog. Okay. There's a dear friend of mine, Lieutenant General, who, by the way, the president just mentioned him here a couple of weeks ago. Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin was the head of U.S. Special Forces and a great friend of the president's as well. And he, after seeing my Boykin Spaniel, he went out and got a Boykin Spaniel. He's about 8 inches taller than Casey, because she was the run of her litter.
You sell it really well. When you talk, I mean, I just went youth duck hunting with my son this last weekend, and what you just described happened. So I'm like, boy, if we could downsize, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
And they don't eat as much either. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, already thinking of maybe looking at a Boykin for the next dog, and I've been a lab guy my whole life.
Promoting a dog breed, Colonel Oliver North and Boysen Spaniels. No, that would be good. If we could get you in the White House, we could make it the dog of the White House too, because it hasn't had that credit yet, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, in fact, it's a relatively new breed. I mean, if the story is straight, the there's very specific characteristics of this particular spaniel, like markings, the tiny white stripe on the chest and no other markings, the way the eyes look at you. Boykins, by the way, will look you right in the eye when you're talking to him. I mean, most other dogs kind of look away, right? But a Boykin will literally look you right in the eye. She is sitting right, I'd turn the camera upside down, but then I wouldn't get it back right. But the bottom line of it, she's sitting right beneath my feet looking at me because she's heard her name mentioned so many times.
Smart dog.
Like John mentioned it first and she picked right up. Taking her out on a dove hunt, for example, first week of September was beginning of dove season here. This, it lasts a week. And the limit, by the way, this year was 15 in West Virginia.
Oh, it went up, yeah.
Took a bunch of wounded guys over there with us, and I love watching these guys shoot. Both when we're standing there together, okay, there's three of us. I've got 2 legs. I'm the only guy there with 2 legs, and these guys are tremendous hunters, and didn't quite limit out. The limit was 15, and I breasted them for him, and I put it in. They were flying back down to Tennessee, and I put it in a one of those little portable bags with about a pound of dry ice. Stayed frozen the whole way back. I gave him the recipe for hooking up the dove breasts, cooking them up, and making sure that you don't overcook them. But they're addictive like potato chips if you do it right.
They are. Yeah, yeah.
She was magnificent. She'll sit there. You're sitting. It's the only kind of hunting besides turkey hunting where you just sit still, right? And you could just see her alert when there was a flock of birds coming. None of the 3 of us would. I was hunting with 2 of these guys right beside me. And none of us would hear the birds, but Casey would. And she'd alert. You see the ears go up, and then she'd stand there, and you see the tail start. Come on, shoot one for me. I need to get it. And she's wagging her tail like crazy. Aren't you? Yeah.
It's nothing like seeing a dog work. And they just love to do what they were bred to do.
Wayne, that's what makes it so hard for the military working dogs, the dogs that you guys have used, the canines. When you lose one, it's a heartbreaking experience. It really is. In many cases, they're just like family.
They are.
So,
no doubt.
Yeah, it is losing a brother or a sister on the team, Colonel, for sure. Man, and we felt it. You hit that perfectly. Well, we hope that. Curious if Casey has any younger brothers and sisters that are still in the lineage to have some pups.
She had 6 when this story. She had 6 puppies. All of them went to wounded guys.
Oh, that's perfect.
Veterans, and she is rated as a therapy dog.
Nice.
Since we're talking common sense, we used to go out pheasant hunting every year. In fact, this is the first year that I've not gone, and it's only because of COVID. And so what United Airlines does, if you've got a certified therapy dog, it can ride next to you in the airplane, right? And I figured out I was shipping her out in a kennel box underneath, in the cargo compartment. And so I got her rated as a therapy dog. It's not hard to get certified if you're me as a crazy man. So you need the dog with you, right? Okay, so I'm paying for my seat, right? Instead, you're not allowed, by the way, you can't use your miles. At least you couldn't. I don't know the new rules, but the rules used to be you could not use your miles for baggage, right? You had to pay for the baggage. It was like $300. Well, now it's $9 for her to sit right next to me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just my miles plus the landing fees.
You get therapy all the way.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. A little nervous about flying? Are you? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, one last quick question on Casey, Colonel. Have you ever tried her on mountain grouse? How is she? I bet she'd be an amazing grouse dog. We are full of our grouse season just opened up here, and it's been incredible.
Well, in fact, my buddies are out. My buddies are right now out hunting sharp-tailed grouse and pheasants in South Dakota. That's where I wanted. That's where I wanted to be. But, yeah, my son-in-law, the MD, does not want me to kill his mother-in-law by bringing COVID back home.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah, so it's
well, Colonel, when the world is safe again to travel, feel free to come up in Northwest Montana and bring her for some mountain grouse because we've got some spots. It would be a real treat to see her work, man.
It is great to watch her work. It really is.
So, Colonel, one thing we've found, I think, and I would like you to comment this, service members that are getting out of whether it's the Marines or some branch of service coming into being a game warden. I think the ones that we get, I'm pretty excited about that. I'd like to promote that and get your feelings on that and what kind of transition that might be.
Well, I think generally the numbers in law enforcement are about 25 to 30%, depending on where you are in the world, where you are in the country, rather, of federal, state, and local law enforcement are veterans. And most of them didn't come from a military police kind of background. They came because they understand service, law enforcement, and game wardens, same thing. The best part about being a game warden is you're not tied to a daggone desk for half your day. And you don't have to, quite frankly, you don't have to walk, around drive around in a patrol car. You can go out in the woods and hike around and make sure that you're enforcing the game warden laws. Two of the game wardens I know very well in West Virginia are both Marines, obviously, because that's probably why I got to know them so well. But if you love the outdoors, and I do, you can't beat it. Now at 77, they're probably not going to hire me as a game warden, but if there's openings, I'll take one.
Hey, Colonel, we noticed kind of on that line, we noticed when the game warden story started to get told a little better through things like Wild Justice and Northwoods Law, the two reality TV shows that Wayne and I were both involved in two separate states. The Patriot Profiles Life of Duty series, our mutual friend Rick Stewart produces. He did a couple documentaries before and during our Met team forming up. And when military veterans got to see that, especially Special Forces guys, they said, wow, we didn't realize there were so many domestic threats to our environment, especially on the cartel side and different types of poaching. And we were getting Marine Corps veterans coming right out, calling me with questions. Hey man, I'm in Colorado. I don't know that I want to go to California. Does Colorado have a team like California, blah, 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 or I'm in Virginia, I'm in Montana. And it was great to see. And by the time when we were forming up Met in the California Game Warden Force, we had a retired SEAL lieutenant, 2 Marine Corps veterans, Army, Ranger veteran. On the Sheriff's Department, same thing. So we were getting skill sets of guys that had been in the fray overseas, and now they were hunting domestically for something they cared near and dear about, not only our public safety, but most of our military vets are hunters and conservationists, sir. So they were like, I did not know game wardens did that type of job. And that validated our profession, but it also brought an added element of skill sets and capabilities to the game warden job. And it's all been because of outreach and things that you've been doing as well. So it's been great to see. And we're trying to get more and more of those men and women back into these particular conservation jobs for that reason.
Then green line.
Yeah. I think the training actually probably mimics better being a game warden than it does your typical local police department, state police department. It seems to be the environment that the Marines work in, the military works in.
Well, yeah. I mean, it calls for great responsibility. Number 2, accountability. Number 3, you're very often out there just by yourself, as you know. I mean, the Met teams and those kinds of operations require a lot of teamwork, but very often the game wardens that I see out in Northwestern Virginia are single, they're solo. And so you've got to have, again, great situational awareness. Number 2, great self-confidence. Number 3, respect for others. Look at understanding. I did not know that in Virginia, at least, when you're out dove hunting, that you have to keep all of your doves together. So if you picked up 5 over here and 5 over there and can't say they're close enough to me that I can account for them, that's subject to a fine. I did not know that. Now, I didn't get a fine for it, but the game warden very kindly explained that to me and a bunch of my buddies, because as you know, you surround a dove field of about 5 or 6 acres, you better have people posted all over the place, not within pellet range of a number 7 shot, number 8 shot, right?
Yep.
Because you see some pretty crazy stuff, and then you realize, yeah, it's falling way short. It's 400 yards away. But those kinds of safety things are the kinds of things that game wardens explain to people on things like the first day of dove season. Absolutely. We had 2 out there with us, and there were probably 250 guys hunting somewhere near enough to be able to see them.
Yeah.
And thankfully, nobody hurt.
Right.
And a good limit this year. I'll give you a complaint. Maryland's limit on water birds, migrating fowl, right? 1 bird. Think of all the guides that were put out of work by that.
Yeah.
And that's because the eastern flyway for water birds is almost empty nowadays. I mean, where I am sitting here looking out at the Atlantic Ocean, this time of year, you would normally see large flocks of migrating Canada geese and all kinds of different ducks. The only ones I've seen so far since we've been here 4 days are cormorants, you know, the big black bird.
Yeah.
Here's a game warden question for you. The automobile that has a cat on its hood is called what? Jaguar, right?
The Jaguar,
Yeah, Jaguar. Jaguar. What automobile brand had the cormorant as its hood ornament?
One that didn't sell well.
It was the Packer. It
Oh,
was a Packer. Yeah, yeah. It's the only bird I think. I'm. Any of your viewers or your pod listeners, tell me if I'm wrong. I think it's the only bird that's ever been a hood ornament. Don't know. Let me know.
Yeah, I think you're right. We're gonna have to research that. We've never seen that.
You know, I'm sitting on a barrier island right now, and I've seen 4 cormorants since we've been. No, and cormorants don't travel in great big crowds. I mean, there's 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6. I've seen 4 in the swamp behind us.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very distinctive bird, though.
Yeah, it is.
And we
Very
do see a lot of them, probably because we don't shoot them.
Well, yeah, well, they are an endangered species. I don't think they're on anybody's, you know, list for being able to hunt them. And the way they fish, you know, they've got an upturned hook on their bill, and so you'll see them snap up with a fish on it. And if he's really good, it's a little fish. He'll snap it up, it'll fly up in the air, gone. One big bite. Unlike an eagle, which will, you know, have it in its claws, or all kinds of different seabirds that migrate through here. And you do see an occasional, you know, the idea of a falcon being able to do something like that is wonderful to watch. You just sit out there on that dune and watch them swoop down and grab a meal and fly ashore with it.
Yeah, it's incredible to see. We have an abundance of bald eagles and osprey here on the Kootenai River, in Lincoln County, where I'm at in Montana, Colonel. And I mean, coming from California and making the bump up here, you know, with family that have been here forever, and seeing birds of that size and nests of that size and what they do to the, you know, rainbow trout coming right off the river and the size of fish they pull out it's a magnificent sight to see. It really is. But turning to I have a little interesting question. When you reviewed Hidden War, you were instrumental in helping expose this drug cartel threat to our American resources like wildlife and waterways with this tainted weed, these EPA banned poisons that are going on, this tainted cannabis, but also talking about these same cartels being responsible for fentanyl production, the synthetic heroin that's killing thousands, if not more, especially Midwest and back east. You know, the methamphetamine production, human trafficking, gun running, and all of that. And now we find out that all those precursor chemicals are coming from China to fuel the cartels' poisoning of our American public with these illicit drugs and destroying our environment. And then, like we just learned recently, President and the First Lady now have tested positive for COVID. We know the origins of COVID. We have some real threats overseas. And you have just published through your publishing group a new book called America's #1 Adversary that deals with the threat of China. And it's very timely for this interview. I'm glad this came up. Can you tell us more about the book, what we're seeing in the content of that book, and dive into that subject a little bit? Because so many people in our public just don't realize how extreme this threat is.
Well, the People's Republic of China, led by Xi Jinping, he's right there on the cover of the book, right over my shoulder here. Xi Jinping represents China's 21st century effort at world domination. And the tools that they use against their own people, this is not a complaint against the Chinese people. This is the communist Chinese government that's doing this. And what they're about to do is to try to dominate the rest of the world. And I look at that experience and I say to myself, the precursor chemicals, the #1 drug exporting activity on the planet is communist China. And they do that because it debilitates all the other countries where you end up with people with serious addictions. If you look at that kind of activity by these guys, it's devastating. And it's only one of the many things that they're doing. They're theft of intellectual property. They're having a hell of a time trying to create an aircraft similar to the F-22, and certainly not even the F-35, but the F-22. And they've crashed a whole bunch of them. What they're now doing is they're reverse engineering the information they've stolen from U.S. manufacturers. And so the president, God bless him, reacted to that when it was first revealed in an article by these three authors, John Poindexter, Bud McFarlane, and Richard Levine. Those three friends of mine were all senior officials in the Reagan administration. They go all the way back. And so one of the things that they've identified is that Communist China is manufacturing more surveillance equipment than any other combination of countries on the planet. Its ability to listen. Everybody remember TikTok, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that everybody was concerned about is whether the Communist Chinese government is collecting that information on American citizens. And they are. If you look back to that terrible explosion that occurred in Beirut, there's thousands of different images from Beirut of that explosion going off. Why? Mm-hmm. Because there were that many cameras at every street corner, 4 and 5, 6 cameras, and it captured that. So you've got all these different images. What they're trying to do is keep track of who you're talking to. Why are you talking to them? Who are you meeting with? And they follow people literally by surveillance equipment all over and some people say, well, that's how you're going to detect bad things happening. My grandchildren do not need to grow up in a police state. What the Communist Chinese are doing around the world is making all of that security surveillance equipment available because they want a totalitarian regime in those places that will support them. China's trade policy up until President Trump was was a disaster for the United States. For 40 years, people in America, senior government officials, both political parties, those folks were aiding and abetting Communist China because everybody felt sorry for them. They needed a break. Allowing them into the World Trade Organization, which the Obama administration did, was a terrible mistake. All of those kinds of trade deals that were done by prior administrations with Communist China gave them the ability to try to dominate the world's economy. Their Belt and Road Initiative, which is all over Africa, is creating access to rare minerals, strategic materials, the kinds of strategic metals, things like cobalt that you need in order to build certain types of weapon systems, for example. They just tried to buy, and the Canadians finally realized what was going on, one of the largest gold mines in the world in Canada. And much of all of that stuff is in this book. And much of it is already being worked on because Bill Barr and Secretary Pompeo, Bill Barr, the Attorney General, and Secretary Pompeo have read the book and they're now acting on it. Well, in my humble opinion, we need this president to continue to be able to work on it.
Yeah, Colonel, it's eye-opening when you look at the depth of vulnerability we have from everything you just said on the China front. And when you get into the fact that our current president was the first to actually put up a wall to that unfair trade practice and try to, on the tariff thing, try to make it fair and even more balanced, where we didn't give everything overseas to keep a balanced marketplace. And then COVID drops.
Yeah.
And now we have COVID worldwide and we know where it started and how it got here. And, I mean, that could be debated left and right, but the bottom line is, if nothing else with the COVID pandemic, if we've learned nothing else, is our vulnerabilities, and to wake up as a country, regardless of where we sit on the left or the right, to preserve what we have and the blessings we have in this great nation. And we haven't seen a book like this come out that really breaks it down from experts that you've worked directly with in the administration leading up to this, not just currently, but many, many years. So please, before we leave the show, let everybody know how they can get a copy of the book. I'm certainly going to dive in more deeper into it since I just learned of it today and dissect it and network it as well. But just alarming to see the depth of what we're dealing with moving forward. And this is going to be our biggest challenge as a country, I think, as well as in the world, as you said, moving forward for quite some time, isn't it?
Well, let me just tell you, it is America's #1 adversary. And they know that, we know that. What they're trying to do is cover it up. One of the things that they tried to cover up very effectively is the idea of doing a secret nuclear deal with the Iranians, right? The only friends on the planet Earth that the Iranians have today is communist China. And Xi is doing both overt and covert action to make it easier for the Iranians to get a nuclear weapon. Why is it that the North Koreans have a nuclear weapon? It's because China's let them, helped them,
Right.
improved on their science on it. All of that's being done by communist China to aim at us, the United States of America, increase our vulnerability. On the COVID issue, look, there's no doubt that this originated there. Was it created by humans or was it just found in animals? Don't know. But what we do know is that as soon as they discovered back in November last year, they discovered something's wrong here. We got all these strange cases of pneumonia, right? And then what they did is they stopped people moving inside China. But if you lived in Wuhan province and wanted to travel, and a lot of people don't know this, you know, Lamborghini, Ferrari, Maserati, where are those cars built? They're made in Italy. You know who makes them in Italy? Hundreds of thousands of Chinese laborers who were allowed to come and go. Why was Italy the first place to break out? Because of that.
There you go.
See, you couldn't travel inside China, but you could travel outside China. And one of the brightest, smartest things that ever happened was the president saying early on was no more people coming here from China. And then eventually banned travel literally around the world from coming and going from the United States. The idea of what the communist Chinese are trying to do, it's very simple, one word, domination. They want to dominate economies, militarily, and spiritually, because they offer no opportunity whatsoever for religious freedom in communist China. So you want a copy of the book? Amazon.com for a discount, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Every bookstore in America is going to have it. I look at the independent bookstores. I've got one right down the road from where I am. I'm going to bring a box of them over there to them tomorrow so that they've got it. I want to make sure they don't have to wait for it. And yes, in the book, it strongly recommends that the only person to carry out a program, not a new Cold War, a program that says the communist Chinese government is what the problem is. It's not the Chinese people. And the only president who's capable of dealing with that is the one we've got with COVID right now.
Yeah, that is just the challenges we're under and the vulnerability right now, especially with POTUS having COVID. But we do hear he's going to continue duties. Thankfully, they say it's a mild case, and we got a fighter there on all levels. So we're going to come out on top of this. But again, another hard hit. And you know, from a micro view aspect of that same threat, I never thought that this connection would link to the cartels and what we fight on the wildlife resource front, coming back to what you and me and Wayne and game wardens and conservationists and everybody on that thin green line love in America that keeps us calm, the outdoor spaces we enjoy, whether we hunt or fish or not, right, Colonel? Just the spirituality we get in nature out of the big cities. And we've talked about this in many previous podcasts, Wayne and I, is kids that haven't had that exposure to wildlife viewing at early morning, a sunrise, waterfowl flying over a waterway, waking up, you know, deer moving around at last light, a dog working. Don't even have to hunt to get something good out of that, and kind of get a life perspective that our urban societies just isn't seeing these days. And we want to perpetuate that. We definitely don't want it all destroyed by a cartel threat or a poaching threat or anything that, you know, chemicals coming from China. Debatable if it's intentional or unintentional or a profit gain, but the bottom line is they're not even firing a shot, and look at the impacts that are happening within our borders to our public with these poisonous things that we're ingesting. So big things to think about moving forward for our whole country. And thank you so much for exposing it and promoting and getting this book out.
Well,
Everybody needs
I
to hear
appreciate
that.
you guys. Thank you. Thanks, Wayne. John.
Yeah.
And Colonel, before we finish, let's talk a little bit about your Real American Heroes program that you just started recently. And given the COVID threat, we can do it safely remotely like we're doing this podcast. Great show, and it's kind of new. And tell us about it, what the format of it is and what you highlight, and how can people view it?
Well, we're doing special editions right now because we can't travel, but we've got a bunch of stuff in the can that we're hoping to be able to get back and follow up on. But if you look at, if you go to Real American Heroes, actually the easiest way to do this is go to olivernorth.com. If you're not a Facebook user, go to olivernorth.com, click on the red bar that's above my head, right? And that will take you to all of the episodes that we've done. We got over 50 episodes in there.
Awesome.
Usually run about anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes a piece. It's a podcast. And what we're trying to do is make people part of, there's nobody alive who's been through anything like this before. And so you've got lots of American heroes who people wouldn't have thought about. Can a nurse standing in a parking lot covered with blue bonnets and blue gowns and blue booties and blue gloves, can that be a hero? You bet. Because that nurse or that doctor or that medical technician is putting themselves at risk for the benefit of everybody, trying to make sure that if you've got it, just the president's, the determination that the president had it was because they were doing these kinds of tests every day at the White House. And he tested positive, and so did his wife, the first lady. I look at those kinds of folks who are doing that as heroes as well, because it only takes one mistake and then you've got COVID. The good news is, old geezers like me are a little bit more vulnerable than young guys like John and Wayne. And the people who are least vulnerable is that new recruit in a game warden training course or a law enforcement academy who's going to go out there and become an American hero by going on the streets of our country. So what we're doing is we're letting guys who do things become part of this story so that 50 years from now, my grandchildren can look back and say, that's what we went through. And I asked that, as you know, John, I asked this kind of question. I said, 50 years from now, what do you want your great-grandchildren to know about what you did in the midst of this pandemic, the riots that are going on, the uncertainty in the world? And that is part of what we are and part of who we are. So Real American Heroes, as I say, olivernorth.com. You can see the entire section. That takes you, by the way, to the YouTube site. But we're up twice a week with a brand new podcast every time.
Excellent. Well, I've seen some, and it's a great show. And the other aspect we don't really think about, other than telling these individual great hero stories going on now, is it's kind of a time capsule for COVID response, unprecedented, and we just don't see that happening, Colonel. So 5, 10, 20 years down the road, our kids, our grandkids, nieces, nephews, the next generation of game wardens are going to see this in the new world, whatever that looks like, and gain a lot from it. So we're looking forward to seeing more episodes, and thanks again for putting that out. Is there anything else on the pipeline that you'd like to talk about that you'd like our viewers and listeners to be aware of, or any projects in the hopper that you'd like to share with us?
I got a couple out there. I'm not ready to share them too much.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. All right.
The problem, it's non-disclosure agreement. But we're looking at a bunch of things that allow me to continue to say, I love keeping company with heroes. That's what this is all about. And I've got this wonderful opportunity that the good Lord's given me to keep on doing it. So hopefully for a few more years. I've promised my grandkids, I am going to retire at 80. Yeah, 80.
Okay. Well, you've still got a lot of fight left then, because you got a few years left.
Lord willing.
Yeah, and a lot of it's just getting the message out there, Colonel, and thank you so much for doing that. Thanks for telling those stories and, telling the American people, because that's what they need to know, what China's doing, what's going on with COVID, how to be prepared, how to live in the outdoors, and how to enjoy it too, just like we all have. So thank you so much for your time. I've enjoyed it.
I appreciate that, Wayne. By the way, I'll call you the next time I got a book coming out, and it's only a week or so away. So the next book is what we call Hero's Lament. It's nice. We interviewed a whole bunch of veterans of every branch of the service. Is this the country I fought for, almost died for? And trying to encourage people to continue to want to serve. But sometimes that's tough.
Oh, right.
Just think about how tough it is right now to recruit a new game warden or recruit a new police officer in some of these places. And the threats of so-called defunding. I mean, quite frankly, it's an enormous challenge. I appreciate you guys. Listen, I got to run. I do have to take the dog to the vet today because today is the day. Today's the
She's
day that I
getting her,
get her.
getting her checkup.
Well, I've got the heartworm stuff. What's the other one? It's a product endorsement, but I need to get the other one for ticks and fleas because.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We don't
I'm
want any
gonna run
Lyme
down
disease.
to the vet. Appreciate you guys. Semper
Thank
Fi.
you, Colonel.
Thanks so much, Colonel. Have a safe day.